On a rainy afternoon in a quiet European city, a small neighborhood restaurant held a secret that would soon change the lives of two strangers forever. Inside its cozy kitchen, a struggling single dad chef wiped his hands on his apron, unaware that a crying baby, abandoned for just a moment, would bring him face to face with a billionaire mother whose heart had been locked away behind success and solitude. What began with a bowl of warm food and a tender act of kindness would unfold into a journey of healing, love, and the rediscovery of what truly matters. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll see how one recipe had the power to break down walls and rewrite destinies. Ethan Reynolds was a man of quiet resilience. Widowed young, he balanced life between his little daughter, Lily, and his modest restaurant tucked away in a corner of Boston's historic streets. The place wasn't much: peeling brick walls, second-hand tables, and a leaky roof whenever it rained, but it was filled with warmth. Every dish he prepared carried the memory of his late wife, a promise to keep their dream alive. His daughter was only 4, bright-eyed and curious, often sitting on a stool in the kitchen humming songs while he cooked. But times were hard. Rent was overdue, the bills stacked higher each week, and competition from larger restaurants threatened to drown his small business. Still, Ethan believed in flavors, in the magic of meals that could touch hearts. He knew food was more than survival. It was a language of love, and he poured everything into it. That evening, the rain poured relentlessly as Ethan prepared to close early. He had only 3 customers all day, barely enough to cover tomorrow's groceries. Just as he was flipping the sign to "closed," the sound of a baby crying echoed outside. Curious and concerned, Ethan rushed to the door. There, under the awning, stood a frantic young woman trying to soothe her infant, her designer coat soaked through. She looked completely out of place against the humble restaurant, like she belonged in boardrooms, not back streets. Ethan hesitated only for a second before opening the door wider. "Come inside," he said firmly. "The baby's freezing." The woman glanced at him, uncertain, but desperation overruled pride. She stepped in, clutching the baby close, her face pale with exhaustion. The warmth of the restaurant enveloped them. Ethan quickly grabbed a towel and gently offered it to her. She murmured a faint "thank you," but her eyes darted around nervously, as if she wasn't used to accepting help from strangers. The baby, her daughter, kept wailing, her tiny fists clenched in protest. Ethan reached out his arms hesitantly. "May I?" The mother froze, instinctively tightening her hold, but something in his calm, steady expression softened her resistance. Slowly, she handed the baby over. Ethan cradled the little girl with practiced ease, rocking her gently as he hummed, a habit he'd perfected with Lily. To the mother's astonishment, the baby quieted, her cries fading into hiccups. "She's hungry," Ethan said softly. "I can make something light. Babies feel the love in food, you know." He smiled faintly, already heading toward the kitchen with the baby balanced against his shoulder. The woman followed, torn between suspicion and gratitude. She watched as this stranger, this man in a worn apron, prepared a small pot of creamy rice porridge, blending it with the gentlest care. When the baby tasted it, she calmed completely, her little mouth moving eagerly. The woman's eyes shimmered, as if she was fighting back emotions she hadn't let surface in years. She whispered, almost to herself, "She's never eaten like that before." Ethan glanced at her and smiled kindly, unaware of the tidal wave of memories crashing through her. She was Eleanor Sterling, Billionaire CEO, known for her iron will and untouchable aura. Yet tonight, in a crumbling restaurant with a crying baby soothed by a stranger's recipe, she felt more human than she had in decades. Eleanor sat silently, her gaze fixed on her daughter as the little one ate. She wasn't used to silence. Her life was constant noise, meetings, phone calls, deals, flights. She had built her empire from scratch, sacrificing friendships, relationships, even her own heart. Success had given her everything but peace. And here, in this dimly lit restaurant, watching her daughter smile for the first time in days, Eleanor felt the walls around her heart tremble. Ethan didn't pry. He didn't ask who she was or why she was there. He simply prepared tea, set it in front of her, and sat across the table. "She's a beautiful baby," he said warmly. Eleanor managed a small nod. She wanted to respond, but words stuck in her throat. Instead, she studied the man before her, his tired eyes, his calloused hands, the faint sadness lingering at the edges of his smile. The baby giggled suddenly, and both adults turned to look. That sound, innocent and pure, broke through the tension like sunlight through clouds. Eleanor laughed softly, surprising even herself. Ethan looked at her, caught in the moment, and for a fleeting second, the world felt still. It was only when her phone buzzed with insistent messages that reality came rushing back. Eleanor stood abruptly, thanking him stiffly. "You've been kind," she said, her voice formal again. She gathered her daughter and prepared to leave, though her eyes lingered on the warm glow of the restaurant. Something inside her hesitated, but pride pushed her forward. She left, not realizing that she had just walked away from the man who would change her life forever. That night, Ethan closed the restaurant later than usual. He cleaned up slowly, his thoughts replaying the scene of Eleanor and her baby. Something about her unsettled him, not in a bad way, but in a way that stirred curiosity. She wasn't just another customer. He could feel the weight she carried, even if she tried to hide it behind polished clothes and a guarded tone. Meanwhile, Eleanor sat in the back seat of her chauffeured car, her daughter asleep against her chest. She stared out the rain-streaked window, thinking of the chef's kind eyes and the way he had calmed her baby so effortlessly. No boardroom negotiation, no assistant, no nanny had ever managed that. It was as though his food carried a comfort she didn't know she needed. But Eleanor quickly pushed the thought aside. She had an empire to run. There was no time for sentimental strangers. Yet that night, when she tucked her baby into bed, the memory of Ethan's cooking and his gentle humming lingered. For the first time in years, Eleanor found herself wondering if she had built a life too empty of moments that truly mattered. The following week was relentless. Eleanor was pulled into merger talks that could expand her company into Europe. She gave fiery presentations, commanded boardrooms, and sealed million-dollar deals. Yet, no matter how many victories she stacked, she felt strangely hollow. Her baby Amelia had grown fussy again, refusing to eat. Eleanor tried formula, expensive blends, even purees her nutritionist recommended. But nothing worked. One sleepless night, Amelia cried so hard Eleanor found herself near tears. Out of desperation, she remembered Ethan's recipe. At dawn, with dark circles under her eyes, she made a decision she wouldn't have imagined a week earlier. She bundled Amelia into the car and instructed her driver to return to that little restaurant. When she walked in, Ethan was already prepping dough, his apron dusted with flour. He looked up, surprised, but smiled warmly. "Back again?" he asked. Eleanor exhaled as if admitting defeat. "She won't eat," she confessed, holding Amelia out like a fragile plea. Ethan's eyes softened. "Then let's fix that." Ethan moved with practiced care, blending soft vegetables into a delicate broth. Amelia's cries quieted as the smell filled the air. Eleanor sat nearby, exhaustion evident in her posture. Watching him cook, she noticed how deliberate he was. Every motion was gentle, almost reverent. He wasn't just making food, he was creating comfort. When Amelia eagerly accepted the meal again, Eleanor's composure cracked. Tears filled her eyes, unbidden. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. Ethan said nothing, respecting her silence, though he noticed the trembling in her hands. He placed a bowl in front of her, too. "You need this as much as she does," he said softly. She ate cautiously, then slowly, then hungrily. The flavors were simple but profound, reminders of childhood warmth she hadn't felt in decades. Each spoonful seemed to loosen the steel armor she wore. By the end, she looked at Ethan with a mixture of gratitude and vulnerability. "I don't know how you do this," she whispered. Ethan only smiled faintly. Food has a way of healing what words can't. Word of mouth began to spread about Ethan's little restaurant. Customers spoke about not just the food, but the way it made them feel. A journalist even wrote a small feature calling it "The Kitchen with a Heart." Business picked up slightly, but Ethan knew it wasn't enough to solve all his problems. Still, he remained grateful. Eleanor began visiting more frequently, always with Amelia. Sometimes she ordered quietly and left quickly. Other times she lingered, watching Lily play in the corner with crayons. For a woman used to marble floors and penthouses, the cozy chaos of Ethan's world felt strangely grounding. One afternoon, Lily offered Amelia a crayon, and for the first time, Eleanor saw her daughter giggle with another child. Something inside her shifted. She realized that in this little corner restaurant, her baby wasn't just another item on her schedule. She was alive, laughing, growing. It terrified Eleanor how much she had missed already. Despite her growing attachment, Eleanor fought hard to keep her guard up. She told herself these visits were practical. Her daughter needed nutrition, nothing more. But Ethan's presence gnawed at her resolve. He was everything she wasn't: open, gentle, unhurried. He listened without judgment, cooked without ego, and lived without excess. One evening, after Amelia fell asleep in her arms, Eleanor admitted something. "I don't know how to be this, a mother. I built a company from nothing, but with her, I feel like I'm failing." Ethan paused, wiping down a counter. He turned, meeting her eyes. "You're here. That's enough to start with. No one gets it perfect. Not me, not anyone." His words were simple, but they struck deep. For once, Eleanor felt seen not as a CEO, but as a mother struggling in silence. As weeks passed, Ethan and Eleanor's paths intertwined more. Sometimes she joined him in the kitchen, awkwardly chopping vegetables while he teased her about her lack of knife skills. Other times, he watched her soften with Amelia, marveling at the transformation. It wasn't romance yet, but something deeper. A trust being built brick by brick. However, shadows loomed. Ethan's landlord delivered a stern warning: pay 3 months overdue rent within 2 weeks, or the restaurant would close. Ethan tried to hide the stress, but Eleanor noticed his distraction. "What's wrong?" she asked one night. He hesitated, then confessed quietly. She felt an ache at his honesty. She could pay his rent 10 times over, but she knew his pride would never allow it. That night, Eleanor sat awake in her mansion, staring at city lights. For all her billions, she had never felt powerless. But with Ethan's dream hanging by a thread, she realized how much his little restaurant meant, not just to him, but to her and Amelia, too. The solution came unexpectedly. Eleanor's company was preparing for a high-profile charity gala. Catering was proving difficult. Every luxury chef in the city seemed overbooked or uninspired. On impulse, she suggested Ethan. Her board members balked, but Eleanor insisted. "Trust me," she said firmly. "This chef doesn't just cook, he connects." When she told Ethan, he nearly dropped his ladle. "Me? At a Billionaire gala?" He laughed in disbelief, but Eleanor was serious. She offered to cover ingredients, staff, and logistics, everything but the recipes. "That part," she said softly, "only you can provide." Ethan wrestled with doubt. He wasn't used to chandeliers and ballrooms, but one look at Lily, who believed in him more than anyone, gave him courage. He agreed, not realizing that this decision would change the trajectory of all their lives. The night of the gala arrived, glittering with wealth and power. Ethan and a small team worked tirelessly in the massive kitchen. He prepared dishes rooted in simplicity but bursting with flavor, each recipe carrying a piece of his heart. When the guests tasted his food, murmurs of surprise rippled through the hall. Hardened investors closed their eyes, savoring flavors that reminded them of childhood kitchens. Journalists scribbled notes. Even the critics were silenced by the authenticity of his cooking. Eleanor watched from a distance, pride swelling in her chest. For once, she wasn't the star of the evening. Ethan was, and he didn't even realize it. She saw the way people responded, the way they softened. And she thought, maybe this man was capable of healing not just her daughter, but her too. After the gala, Ethan's restaurant exploded in popularity. Lines formed outside daily and reviews poured in. His dream was no longer crumbling, it was thriving. But success brought new challenges. He was stretched thin, working longer hours, often at the expense of time with Lily. Eleanor noticed. One evening, she found Lily asleep on a chair in the corner while Ethan rushed between tables. Her heart clenched. She approached him and whispered firmly, "You can't do this alone. Let me help." Though reluctant, Ethan finally accepted. Eleanor used her business acumen to streamline his operations, hire staff, and market his brand, all without changing the soul of the restaurant. Together, they built something stronger than either could have imagined. As their partnership deepened, so did their bond. They began to share pieces of themselves. Ethan told her about his late wife, the laughter they'd shared, the dream they'd built together before fate cut it short. Eleanor, in turn, revealed the loneliness behind her empire. "I thought love made you weak," she confessed once. "But maybe it makes you stronger." Their conversations stretched late into the night, long after customers left. Sometimes they spoke of dreams. Sometimes they sat in silence, content just being there. Slowly, carefully, a tenderness bloomed between them. Yet both were cautious. Ethan feared betraying the memory of his wife. Eleanor feared opening her heart after years of shielding it. Still, their walls were crumbling, brick by brick, meal by meal. Spring arrived with blossoms along the cobblestone streets, and Ethan's restaurant thrived like never before. But with growth came change. Investors approached him with offers to franchise, to turn his humble kitchen into a nationwide brand. Ethan felt torn. Expanding meant security for Lily, but it also risked losing the soul of what he had built. Eleanor, watching him struggle with the decision, encouraged him to trust his instincts. "You don't have to take every opportunity," she said gently. "Sometimes protecting what's precious is braver than chasing what's big." He smiled faintly. "Funny. That's advice a billionaire rarely gives." She smirked, but her eyes softened. Meanwhile, their children grew inseparable. Lily adored Amelia, guiding her steps as she learned to walk, while Amelia giggled endlessly at Lily's antics. The sight of them together often left Ethan and Eleanor standing side by side, their silence heavy with unspoken emotions. One evening, after closing, Ethan and Eleanor walked along the quiet river nearby. The city lights shimmered on the water. Ethan hesitated before speaking. "You've changed my world," he admitted quietly. "And not just with the restaurant." Eleanor's breath caught, but she kept her gaze ahead. "I wasn't looking for this," she confessed. "I don't even know if I deserve it. My life has been about control, achievement. But with you, I feel like I can breathe." Her voice trembled, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed. For a moment, their hands brushed, lingering just long enough to hint at something deeper, but neither made the final step. Both carried scars, his from love lost, hers from love never trusted. And so they walked in silence, hearts racing with possibilities too fragile to name. Trouble came when a ruthless investor, angered by Ethan rejecting his franchise offer, began spreading damaging rumors about the restaurant. Suddenly, inspectors arrived with impossible demands, and suppliers hesitated to deliver. Ethan's dream once again teetered on collapse. Eleanor fought fiercely behind the scenes, using her influence to shield him, but Ethan discovered her involvement and grew frustrated. "I can't let you fight all my battles," he said. His pride stung. She fired back. "And I can't stand by while everything you've built is destroyed." The tension drove a wedge between them. For the first time, Eleanor stopped visiting the restaurant. Ethan missed her presence more than he expected, but his pride kept him from reaching out. The warmth of the place dimmed, even as customers continued to arrive. During their distance, Amelia grew ill with a stubborn fever. Eleanor tried everything: doctors, medicine, specialists, but Amelia refused food, her tiny body weakening. Desperate, Eleanor remembered Ethan's words. "Food has a way of healing what words can teach." With trembling hands, she bundled Amelia up and returned to the restaurant. When Ethan saw them at his door, pale and desperate, his heart softened instantly. He swept Amelia into his arms, rocking her gently as he prepared the same soothing porridge as before. Amelia accepted it, her fever breaking slowly over the next hours. Eleanor sat nearby, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered. Ethan looked at her, his own eyes shining. "You'll never have to find out." From that night, the walls between them finally cracked. Eleanor stopped pretending she could do everything alone. Ethan let go of his pride, accepting her as his equal partner, not just a benefactor. Together they rebuilt trust, not through grand gestures, but through everyday moments, shared meals, bedtime stories, laughter echoing through the small restaurant. Lily and Amelia thrived in their blended family. Their giggles became the soundtrack of the restaurant, drawing smiles from even the sternest customers. Locals began calling the place not just a restaurant, but a home you can taste. Ethan and Eleanor found themselves drawn closer, their conversations deeper, their silences more comfortable. The ache of the past remained, but it no longer defined them. They were building something new, together. One night after closing, Ethan surprised Eleanor with a meal just for her. Candlelight flickered across the worn wooden table. He placed a dish before her and sat across with nervous anticipation. "This was the first recipe my wife and I created together," he explained softly. "It's part of who I am. But tonight, I want to share it with you, because you've become part of my story too." Eleanor tasted it, her eyes filling instantly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. In that moment, she realized she wasn't competing with a ghost. Ethan wasn't replacing his late wife. He was honoring her memory by opening his heart again. And Eleanor, for the first time in her life, allowed herself to truly love. Their relationship blossomed quietly but steadily. They weren't flashy or dramatic. Instead, they built a rhythm, mornings filled with laughter over spilled cereal, afternoons balancing business calls with playtime, evenings spent in the glow of the restaurant. But the outside world noticed. Tabloids caught sight of Eleanor with Ethan, spinning stories about the billionaire and the chef. Some mocked, others romanticized. Reporters camped outside her mansion, digging for details. Eleanor worried her world of power might crush Ethan's peaceful life. Yet Ethan reassured her gently. "Let them talk. What matters is us, and these kids." His calm steadiness anchored her in ways even billions could not. For once, she stopped caring about the headlines. Months later, Ethan received devastating news. His restaurant's building had been sold to developers who planned to tear it down for luxury apartments. His lease would end in 6 months. The dream he had rebuilt was under threat again. This time, he didn't face it alone. Eleanor stood by him, fierce and determined. "We'll fight this," she declared. But Ethan shook his head. "Maybe it's time for a new chapter, a bigger space, more room for growth." Together, they scouted new locations. Eleanor offered to invest, but Ethan insisted it remain a partnership, not a rescue. For the first time, they planned a future, not just for the restaurant, but for their family. They found a historic building on the edge of town, weathered but full of charm. With Eleanor's resources and Ethan's vision, they transformed it into a larger restaurant while keeping the heart of the original intact. Opening night drew crowds from across the city. The menu was simple, heartfelt, and unforgettable. Customers described it as food that told a story of loss, resilience, and love. As Ethan looked around the bustling dining room, his daughter laughing with Amelia in the corner and Eleanor smiling proudly beside him, he realized something profound. This wasn't just his dream anymore. It was theirs. Life settled into a new harmony. The restaurant flourished, but more importantly, so did their family. Lily started school, excelling with confidence. Amelia grew stronger, her giggles brightening every corner of the new restaurant. Eleanor learned to slow down, often trading late-night meetings for bedtime stories and Sunday picnics. Ethan, in turn, allowed himself to dream bigger, knowing he had a partner who believed in him unconditionally. One evening, as the four of them walked home hand in hand, a passerby whispered, "That's the billionaire and the chef." But to them, it didn't matter. They weren't defined by titles anymore. They were simply a family. On the anniversary of the restaurant's reopening, Ethan planned something special. After dinner service, he gathered everyone, staff, customers, friends, around. With Lily and Amelia at his side, he turned to Eleanor, his hands trembling slightly. "Eleanor," he said softly, his voice carrying through the room, "you walked into my life on a rainy night and nothing has been the same since. You showed me that love doesn't replace, it multiplies. And together, we've built something worth more than any fortune. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Eleanor's cheeks as she whispered, "Yes." The room erupted in cheers, but Ethan only saw her, glowing in the warm light. In that moment, the single dad chef and the billionaire mom knew they had found their forever, not in wealth or success, but in love, family, and a recipe that healed them all.